just start now.
Yeah.
So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us for our melee meeting. Cough, cough. Hunters are now melee for our purposes.
And shamans.
And shamans and druids and all. Anybody, discipline priests, I think they have a melee ability, yeah?
Yeah, they have a staff. They can hit people with a staff.
Wand spec.
Spawn, you want to start with intro?
So, class leaders. Why we have class leaders it's a guidance. We're here to help you guys. We want to succeed. We're going for the most Scarab Lords in the world in our guild. Like that's one of our hidden goals. We want you to succeed as a DPS. We want to be a community, a guild. We're here for each other. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into having a classic guild. And anybody coming from retail, there's 20 people nowadays in a raid, so it's like half the raid size. So we want to have multiple raids, and we're gonna have more class leaders, I think, too, to help out things.
When you look at Discord and you see like melee leader versus hunter leader, like some of us might have titles that are a bit more hyper specialized than the other, but at the end of the day, every single one of us that's holding one of these ranks, we're not here to bully you. We're not here to give you shit for missing raids. We're not the bad guys. We're here to try to help you guys. So if there's ever a problem, if there's something that you need, we're also here to try to ease the upper management. The GM is going to be real busy. We're looking at 200 plus people. That's a lot of work for 2 or 3 guys to be able to handle. So just because you see a hyper specialized title on Discord, don't let that discourage you. So we're talking about guild expectations. As far as the consumable stuff, this is going to be relevant, but we have no way to know what the specifics are going to be. Private servers had a formula that they decided to use, and that's definitely not... we know that that's wrong. So as far as things we use the example of Black Lotus spawning, we don't know how these things are going to work. So just kind of be open, what you think you might know about consumables might shift around a little bit. But, there are going to be expectations on you guys. It's nothing that's going to be above and beyond what any of you guys are willing to put into the game. You just got to remember that it's a new thing from Blizzard's perspective. They're building an old game on a new system. Things are bound to not be 100% replicated.
As you're going into your first couple of days to the first couple of weeks that you're at 60, just understand that the expectations will be that you can do what you can do with the time that you have. But understand that later on, as stuff becomes farmable content, expect that we will start ratcheting down the requirements for Core Raider. So things like your enchantments need to be done. Your gear should be PreBis level, or better if you have slots that are available with better gear. Shirking on your responsibilities is not something that you want to do once we get to that point. You should be trying to optimize your character and your playstyle as much as possible.
We're pretty much not going to be having flash, from what I understand. We for Molten Core and BWL, we don't think it's going to be a requirement at this point. But you are going to be expected to have some food buffs. Don't be lazy. Level cooking, level fishing. All this stuff can make you money in the end, especially if you can get the kick and chops recipe later on down the road. You can make some good money off that cooking. If you want to be a Scarab Lord, you're going to get that recipe.
Talking about leveling, there's a lot of things. We're talking specifically about professions. We're trying to keep these slides as lightweight as possible, so I will end up posting all of these links. We'll probably post the actual slides themselves later, but we're not going to go through every single hyperlink that you see in the PowerPoint. But the synopsis here is level your professions while you're leveling your character. It's going to make your life easier. There's a note here specifically for the rogues about your lockpicking skill. It's going to most likely work different than how it does on private servers, but there are plenty of guides out there. The important thing is that you really want to make sure that you get that lockpicking skill maxed out as you're leveling.
So Jonah's leveling guide is probably one of the famous solo leveling guides that's out there. It's like by phase 3, you are going to be expected to have engineering. It's going to be a huge thing for us. It helps the raid a lot. It helps us for PvP a lot. While you're leveling, though, you can pick up gathering profession, skinning, anything to help you make money. And if you're doing gathering, and you have some low level stuff, I mean, you can give them to other people in the guild to help them boost their professions. Build a community while you're leveling. Don't just before you vendor something, offer it to somebody in the guild. Hey, I got this, 20 stack or whatever. It's 9 silver. Anybody want it?
Yeah, it's definitely. I know a couple of you guys have come up to me in confidence already, like with concerns about the whole engineering thing. I mean, it's in classic WoW, it's a very different ball game. Retail WoW, by the time like Cataclysm rolled out, they started giving secondary professions abilities that were raid relevant. Like I think skinning gave crit at one point. It's just in the environment that we're gonna be in. Engineering is really the only profession that actually will give a in raid benefit that will actually modify your throughput. And it's at the end of the day, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to play the game the way I want to play it." If you're trying to raid and you really want to push, I I'm of the mindset that I don't think like world first kills are going to be like the super big thing. I think a lot of people are going to be more interested in things like speed runs. At the end of the day, we're playing a 15-year-old game. We all know that the formula has kind of been solved already. You can have alts. Your alts can have a lot of these professions. Someone's talking about alchemy in chat. Like the alchemist themselves, you can have an alchemist on another character. You can send the pots and flasks over. It's not going to be as dramatic. Engineering is just massive, especially as melee. We're gonna have things like the battle chicken. That's a crazy thing that's very hard to replace. So I know that some people are not too thrilled with the idea of being like bullied into a profession, but it's a really good profession to have.
And you always have another profession. It's just we're here as a community to succeed, and one of the things that's going to help us succeed is having engineering on everybody that's serious about.
Wemmy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, thinking forward into later raid content, specifically talking about AQ40, sapper charges are what kills Viscous. If you want that boss down, if you want loot off that boss, and you're not engineering, and you should be, that's something you should think about. Another thing to think about regarding crafting profession, specifically talking about like blacksmithing, leatherworking, there's not a high need for those. There should really only be a couple of those per guild, and those people should have the recipes when they drop. Obviously, you want to have a backup or a second backup.
You're going to have 3 maximum.
Exactly. You really
Of
should
each
go
type.
into crazy amounts of leather workers. Like you should have 2 of each specialization at the most. And like speaking for myself, I'm going to be going into molten core with leatherworking and skinning. I'm probably going to hold on to skinning until phase 3, where I drop it for engineering, because that's where the precedent needs to be. That engineering profession is incredibly important.
I know that a lot of the concerns, like people have been throwing around the word that like some of us are having maybe more of an elitist mentality, and that's not what we're going for. Like that's not what we want to do as a guild. Like we want people to be able to play what they want to play, but there is a certain amount of, like I said before, this is a 15-year-old game. A lot of the numbers have kind of cough been solved, and we're trying to give you guys what the main aim here is. We're trying to give you guys the tools to know like who solved these things, when they solved them, and why. We're not just saying like, hey, go do this because we think it's a really good idea. There's usually some very solid information behind those decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's like cold hard fact or you can't have a workaround, but these are general guidelines that we're trying to give you guys.
So we got the dungeon farm groups. Just to recap, you can sign up for that stuff. There's a link. Just keep in mind you can gather quests before you go in. Don't spend a whole lot of time in there. Try to grab the quests, do the dungeons. Run it as fast as possible. While you're in there, Cold Rage Dagger from RFD. They're gonna drop. Make sure you save stuff like that. We have a whole slide dedicated to quest items and stuff to get while you're questing. So just keep in mind for stuff like that you could use later on.
we didn't get the time to fill this in too, but a lot of people have been asking the question like, what's the fastest way to level? So we were talking about dungeon farming first versus questing. What we saw on the most recent stress test was they were implementing all of the dynamic spawn times that current live WoW has, and they make a massive difference. Like, we were in here, we weren't necessarily speed running anything, but we were in here the day of the stress test, and we were casually just seeing like what our 1 to 10 times were, and there was a moment where I think I did 2 quests the entire time, and the rest of it was 3 different spawn locations of just me killing the same 3 boars, or me killing the same 3 pirates, or me killing the same 3 crocodiles, and it was ridiculously fast. So I think I ended up beating out some of the people that were questing by like a good 20 minutes of just grinding, and I ended up with a crap ton of gold. I ended up with a full set of bags. So if that ends up pressing into the launch, that will be an additional alternate way to level. The main takeaway from this is when you're looking at leveling, just if you can, if your goal is to speed level, make sure that you have a game plan before the launch. Don't wait until the day of, because you don't want to find yourself behind the curve and then not being able to get, like, deciding to do questing and never being able to get a tag on a quest mob. Alright, so gold making. This is going to be, I know this is something I'm personally going to be spending a lot of time on. We have some notes here. As far as like the rogue stuff is concerned, there's a video to frozen room farming. That's not going to be until phase 6, so it's relevant to know that gold farming is a relevant factor throughout the entirety of Classic, but it's not necessarily something that's going to be, you're not necessarily going to be doing the same thing to make that gold throughout the entirety. You know, a lot of people love playing the auction house. When the Classic launches, no one's going to have gold, so there's not going to be any gold in the auction house. So you have to find additional ways to make gold, especially in the earlier phases. At the end of the day, I think this is going to be a big, this is why we're pushing level your professions as you're leveling your character. It's going to be very useful. Have gathering alts. For rogues, the lockpicking and selling opening of keys to places. These are all going to be things that you can do. Pickpocket, make sure that you have all of your resources. These are going to be things that you're going to do to make gold. I know personally I will probably be farming Devil Sores because I will probably be rushing to 60 as fast as possible, and I'll probably be farming Devil Sores for the first 2 weeks after I hit 60. And that's all you'll see me do, outside of like if a dungeon group needs help with something.
Most of your gold making is going to come from your professions right away. Later on, we'll be able to do like DME runs with the, if you're a geared warrior, or you can get yourself a healer, you can do DME runs. There's a Scarm video that's in the slide that you can look at and shows you how to do that, and you can make good money. At the end of Dire Mall East, for anybody that doesn't know this or never ran Dire Mall before, there's if you're doing engineering and mining as a warrior, you can do the run, and at the end of the run there's rich thorium nodes that you can mine, and you can get arcane crystals, you can get thorium, you can get other materials that you can sell. And if you're with, say, a shaman that's dropping Wind Fury and you want to clear that stuff quick and he's enchanting, you can disenchant all the blues, or you can sell like the bow to somebody, or you can make money. There's ways to make money. And it's going to be hard at the start, and we want to encourage people to get what they need for items, and your epic mount is going to be huge for PvP. So you're going to be doing a lot of grinding for money.
Yeah, Whammy kind of touched on this a few slides ago, but this is another big thing about, like, we're trying to help you guys be as time efficient as what you're able to put into the game. One of the things that's going to happen is that once the game fully launches, that's probably going to be the biggest lull that you have, because that's when you're going to have the most accessibility. We are not worried about Molten Core. Molten Core is going to be killed in blues and greens with level 58s running around. Molten Core is going to fall over. That's not what we're worried about. It's going to happen. The big thing, like, one of the big things in phase 1, like, this is your prime time. This is where, like, your goal is. You want to be able to make effectively enough gold that you can ride that gold for the rest of Classic's expansion if possible. That's a really good mentality, because that's just going to be where the time investment is going to make the most sense for you. You're going to have the most free time to do things like looking at gold. If you just kind of sit around and you wait around, you're going to find yourself in later phases just inundated with content, and you're not going to find enough time to sit there and really make your gold unless you're really trying to play the auction house. But I think that's a big takeaway there.
So be prepared for the next phase.
And if you're grinding, there's a lot of certain things you can grind, like elementals. You know, you can get the rock elementals in the Badlands. You can just hoard away all that elemental earth for AQ40. You know, elemental fire, all that stuff you can save. You know, and then when later on goes down the road, you know, you can either use it for yourself or you can turn it into pots and make a lot of money. When AQ40 hits, it's going to be huge. You know, the consumables are going to go through the roof.
And I don't want to take too much time on this particular aspect just because I'm not sure how many hunters I have in attendance. But those of you that are thinking of playing a hunter either as a main or as an alt, Maradon goes without saying. If you don't know what I'm talking about, DM me. I'll give you the whole rundown. I've got videos of how to do it. I've got walkthroughs in text form as well. Solo farming Maradon is 100% the best way for a hunter to make money the entire length of the game. It's easy. It's something you can do in your spare time. There's no competition for it. You just got to do some preparation ahead of time.
That's spicy. I might even ask you about that myself later.
Mm.
All right. So, we finally level. You've gotten your character, you've leveled, and now we're going to backtrack and talk about what race you should have leveled instead.
Yeah.
Every race has benefits. There's a couple up there that really have no benefit. Ultimately, your best race is Orc. We're on a PvP server. We're going to be PvPing, and that stun resist is huge. And as a melee, one of the best trinkets you can ever get in the game is DFT, Drake Fang Talisman. And that is a trinket with hit, attack power, and dodge. But as an Orc, if you're using an axe, you basically get that trinket for free. It's like having an extra trinket with Blood Fury. And the axe specialization is huge. You know, if you're a hunter, you know, you got pet damage. So if you're serious about raiding, I can't make you play anything. But if you're serious about raiding, Orc is probably your number one go-to choice.
You said that
anybody
very
have
well.
anything to add?
I know you're super passionate about Orc. For Rogue, it is the same. Orc will outperform Troll. It's just a thing. We know that the numbers are weird for how Berserking works. It's going to be 43% haste when you're badly hurt. It does snapshot. If you want to be a troll, that's fine. It makes sense. If player skill is equal, you will still be outperformed. Undead have Will of the Forsaken. Everybody's super excited about it. It's... Orc is the master race. It really is. That's the takeaway. But, you know, like he said, we're not going to force you into a specific race. At the end of the day, you play what you want to play. But if you really are trying to min-max, Classics, race, spread, the racials are a lot more impactful in Classic than they are in any other form of World of Warcraft.
And if you try to argue that going on dead for Will the Forsaken, it'll make me want to slap.
Side note, Tauren Warrior, or Tauren Rogue, that's where it's at. There are add-ons that'll let you do it, which is another side note. If you just care about swing animations, because I know there are people that do care about swing animations, there are add-ons that you can run that will change your character's model so that it only looks like a Tauren Rogue to you, and to the rest of the world, you're still an Orc.
Yeah, don't play Tauren. If you want to be in a raid spot, just don't. There is literally nothing you can bring to the table as a Tauren hunter in a raid, other than you can stun somebody on a 2-minute cooldown. Maybe. I personally am going to be rolling Orc just because we're leaning more towards PvP-based servers. I really want that stun resist for myself because I know that at some point I am going to have to rank, and it's going to make my life a lot easier. That being said, Troll has the higher DPS output for PvE, so I'm taking a chance at it, and I honestly think I'll still be able to perform well enough as an orc. Keep that in mind. If you have no interest in PvP whatsoever, you should probably go troll because you're going to get more DPS output in the long run.
There was another comment that was in chat, GTR. I can personally vouch. I know people that have been using some of these you can do your research if you really are interested in changing your character model. It is client side. You will not get banned. I know people that have been doing it for about 15 years, and they still use it today, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There are people that use Gnomish Auto Assigner and fully automate their game and still don't get banned. That's not what Blizzard's after. That's not what Warden bothers to track. And if people don't know, Warden is the name of their automated ban bot.
Horde has a huge benefit, not only being the master race, you also have the ability to play two-hand and be actually one of the top DPSs, if not the top DPS, is a two-hand warrior. The most common one is the spec to play is the hamstring spec, and for lack of a better word, it's brain dead easy to play. With that being said, though, we can't. Things are going to drop in the raid. We can't have every warrior being a two-hand warrior because there's somebody's going to be using an Arcanite Reaper for like probably the whole game at that point. We do have a slam spec. There's some couple things up in the air with Classic that we're gonna have to wait until it launches to test it for sure. Supposedly that when you have Wind Fury, Sunder Armor and Slam are proccing Wind Fury. So we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it because Slam might be better. Don't know. Have to do some testings for sure when it goes live. Dual Wield Fury. That's going to be big too because we got the Tooth of Tyrannicus, whatever it is from Sunken Temple. It's a nice, one-hand action you can get your hands on, at the start. So Dual Wield Fury is going to be a big thing. We'll be able to gear you for that because one of the best axes that you can have for a good majority of the game is Deathbringers, and that drops an Ani, and that's available phase 1. And if we have everybody that's playing two-hand, we're going to need to give that axe to somebody. And I would like a pretty even amount of all specs, just so that way we don't have those type of loot issues.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll get more into gear in a little bit, but this is a good sticking point to point out that this is another one of the things where I've gotten some backlash from you guys. I know a lot of people feel like they're being forced into certain specs. At the end of the day, these are guidelines. These are, again, it comes back to that puzzle being solved. Like, we understand, when you're trying to hyper-optimize, there are certain things that we need to accommodate for. On the rogue end of things, Deadly Poison, yeah, on paper, in Sims, Deadly Poison's great, but in functionality, we don't have the debuff limit. They are recreating the debuff limit. We get 16 debuffs and 40 people. It's not even enough for each player to have one debuff. It's the type of thing where some of these talent choices, they look really appealing, they sim really well, they're great in solo play, they're great in 5-man play, they're really great in PvP. When we're giving you guys these builds, these are calculated builds that are really powerful based on the raiding environment that we are trying to foster.
While we're here in the spec tree, any spec can tank pretty much for a warrior, low-level dungeons. So don't be that warrior that's in looking for a tank for.
Yeah, that comes down to guild image. If you guys, we really want to have every warrior that's prepared to be able to tank if needed. And if you're in chat as a warrior trying to find a tank for your group, that has potential to make us look really bad. That being said, I want to talk about the rogue specs a little bit. So, and we'll get more into the whys in a bit, but there are two really big things that we want to talk about here. It's basically, do you want to focus on PvE as your primary number one goal? Do you want to focus on PvP as your primary number one goal? And what kind of overlap would you like to have? The shortest answer that we can give is if your main focus is PvE, the combat sword build is really the build that we're trying to push. This comes down, there's a lot more, like I said, we'll talk about it in loot, but it is easier for us to advocate for you guys to get specific weapon types. We can get you guys really functioning high throughput specs, and we can do it relatively easily if we work together and we coordinate our specs so that we're all playing very powerful abilities while not necessarily fighting with each other over loot. That being said, for if you want a PvP, most likely you're probably looking more for daggers. The Sealed Fate dagger build, by the very end of Classic WoW, Sealed Fate daggers is the highest throughput spec, period. It outputs more damage than combat swords, combat daggers. It is just the go-to. We tested this last night, and I wanted to see what it looked like in low gear levels. You will see a lot of guides reference when to switch from combat daggers to Sealed Fate daggers. There are certain thresholds where Sealed Fate daggers outright becomes better than combat daggers. However, in low gear levels, the two specs are still very competitive. The thing that I really want you guys to take away from this if you're planning to play a rogue is as we progress through the content will get progressively more and more challenging. One of the things that my hope is to try to alleviate is I would like to hope that you guys are able to worry about your consumables, you're able to worry about the raid mechanics, you're able to worry about whatever it is that we need for the fight dependency. I would rather you not have to also worry about playing a brand new spec on top of that. So if you're trying to make the transition from combat daggers to Sealed Fate daggers, there is a learning curve that's involved with that. What I'm getting at is it is completely viable for you to start the game in Phase 1 as Sealed Fate daggers. You will do acceptable damage, and then you can skip that learning curve process and perfect your spec later. With that, if you want to play combat daggers, that's fine. It is an acceptable spec. It will end up getting replaced later down the road, but at the end of the day, this is mostly for the PvPers that want to step foot in raid anyway.
One thing to touch on the specs here, and it's a gear thing. So you want to be a badass dagger rogue. That's cool. Well, Perdition's Blade, Corion Tooth, not in the game Phase 1. So what are you going to use? Warrior. You want to be a badass two-handed warrior. Well, right off the bat, you got Arcanite Reaper. Bone Reaver's Edge. We have to test a few things with the Annihilator to see if the Annihilator buff stacks. And if it does, if you're a Raiden Warrior, you're going to be expected to have one. When the fight starts, you're going to be expected to have that on, and, your first global should be a Sunder Armor.
This link that I provided here is just a general overview of different play styles for hunters. But really the main thing, you're going to be rating one of two specs for the entirety of Classic as a hunter. The one that specs all the way down the survival tree so you can hit cap, or you're going to be using that spec once you have hit cap on your gear, which is basically just a modified marksman spec. So there's one of two options. Do not show up to a raid and pop Bestial Wrath. Please. Your pet's going to die in 10 seconds on most bosses.
That's really funny.
And true.
Alright. So, just some general stats for you guys. This is going to be on the visual. I don't think it's worth necessarily going over every single point, but what you'll guys see on screen is you'll just see the transitions of how much each stat point is going to be worth for you. One of the big things that I wanted to talk about on this slide, and this is mostly to you rogues out there, there is a secondary term that we're going to be using, and that term is AEP or MAEP. These are agility equivalency points. This is something that has been designed a long time ago. It's basically how much is any point of any stat weight compared to 1 point of agility. This gives us one very simple number. It allows you to put two pieces side by side. Whichever one has the bigger number is the better piece. It's a thing that you can do. There's a chart that we'll get into. The big difference between the two systems, AEP, this is going to be for our PvPers. The big difference here is that it puts a much higher value on stamina because you're going to be getting hit so you need to have more stamina, and that's relevant. For the Raiders, you guys are going to be focusing on the MAEP value because that removes stamina and assumes that you're not standing in fire and being dumb. But these numbers have been updated. The gentleman who posted his guides, he played the game all the way through, I want to say, Warlords of Draenor, maybe Mists. But he was kind enough that he looked through his archives, and his old website is now backloaded to that of the patch 1.12 data file. So all of the information on that website is going to be relevant for this particular content, and it is updated for actual live Classic. It was never influenced by private servers because it existed before private servers.
One thing to take away from this is, if you notice, the first line is agility. So agility is very valuable for a warrior. So things like Ani neck that have agility on them, you can arguably say that agility is one of the most powerful stats when it comes to gear, considering how little agility you need to gain actually 1% crit as a warrior.
Under the hunter column, pay attention to the 53 agility equals 1% crit. In early gear levels, and if you're not stacking raid buffs and such, like if you're not consuming, you're not getting your buffs like Mark of the Wild and such, it might be more beneficial to actually run high crit, high AP as much as you can in certain situations with dungeons, just because you won't have that scaling. But when it comes to raiding, agility is your best friend as a hunter, because you need to hit that 20 to 22% crit mark as soon as possible early game, so you can be somewhat competitive in damage. I'm actually working currently on a document that's attempting to copy this AEP and MAEP style formula for a hunter in specific environments. So keep your eyes out for that if you're interested in that type of information. I'm going to be looking to do itemization from starting at level 10 all the way up through 60, including raid content.
I'll be happy to lend you whatever help I can with that as well.
Thanks.
All right, weapon normalization. Oh boy. So this has been another thing that's been heavily talked about by a lot of people. I'll let Bodhi deal with the warrior stuff for this. The big takeaway here is that in patch 1.8, weapons were normalized as far as attacks are concerned. So what this means is that if you have abilities that used to scale on weapon speed, they do not matter anywhere near as much anymore. Especially for rogues, there used to be a point in time where we really, really cared about the speed of our weapons. It affected poison procs. It affected, later in Burning Crusade, it affected Shiv, which I put a reference to in here. The moral of the story is that if you are using a one-handed weapon, it doesn't matter if it's 2.0 or 2.6. As far as your Sinister Strike is concerned, the weapon speed is 2.4. So when you look at your damage breakdown list, yes, we know melee attacks are going to be huge. This is a massive source of our damage, but when you look at the sources of your other elements of damage, weapon speed is not going to be anywhere near as relevant for Classic as what it used to be. The more important thing, and I know Kurthos has been pushing this for a while, the more important thing to look at is you want to look at the average weapon damage and the DPS. Ideally, you want to have weapons that have closer numbers. So maces, for all my combat maces PvPers out there, one of the issues with maces is that maces have a massive spread of damage. This is going to be relevant when we start talking about the hit table and how crushing blows work, but the synopsis is, because it has that massive spread of damage, you have to know, like, a weapon swings, it might deal the damage based on the low end, it might deal the damage based on the high end. The most important factor is going to be the average number between them. If you can get a weapon that has a close range, that'll generally outperform. The other big thing is you just want to take a look at the different abilities that you have if you're not familiar with what a normalized attack is versus a non-normalized attack. WoW Wiki has an entire section on normalization, on how these things work and exactly how this happens. I know that there's going to be some differences for warriors. I don't think it's going to be as relevant for them. But for rogues, don't necessarily care about the weapon speed. I know a lot of daggers are 1.3 speed, and there are many people that didn't want to put a 1.3 speed dagger in their main hand because of backstab. Well, it's normalized, so it doesn't matter if it's 1.3 or 1.7. That's my takeaway from that.
Well, if you're a warrior and you listen to all that, if you look on the little side there and it says normalized attacks for warriors, overpower, mortal strike, whirlwind. I mean, I think the most that I've pressed overpower in a fight once I get geared is once, twice. When I have like 10 rage and nothing left to do in a fight, I might overpower. In a PvE environment, I've never hit mortal strike unless I was doing a 5-man. Whirlwind, though, that's one thing. But overall, for normalized, non-normalized attacks, cleave fight, you're gonna want a slow or hard to hitting weapon. Heroic strike, that's your filler spell. When you get gear, you'll be doing it a lot more if you're dual wielding. You'll be doing a lot more heroic strikes later on down the road. Rend, not gonna rend. Slam, if it's not normalized, and if it procs Wind Fury still, Slam spec might be viable. So,
That's a good note for Slam, too, because the weapon normalization, for those that are confused, there were multiple weapon normalizations throughout WoW's history. The one that happened in patch 1.8 is specifically for instant attacks that scaled on weapon speed. Slam does technically have a cast. It is not an instant ability, and therefore is not normalized.
Alright, so there's two different caps. You got a yellow hit cap, which give your instant abilities that do damage that is yellow. And then you have your auto attacks, which do damage that is white. So you got two different hit caps. For gear, you only need 8% for most people, unless you're orc. You only need 6 because you got weapon skill.
That's for warriors only. That's an axe thing. So
Yeah.
rogues, you're at 9.
Yeah.
That's your life.
This little chart over here calculates your glancing blows and the difference between and the defense of the boss or monster. So it's 5 points level, so if it's 3 levels above, that's 15 points. Weapon skill itself provides like a 2% on your hit and crit multiplier. It's like 0.5% per 5 points of weapon skill. The hard cap is at 315 because that's 3 levels of 60, so that's 63 monster. Hit only decreases your chance to miss, so therefore it adds more actual attacks that occur that are either glances or normal hits or critical hits. So you're just adding to your rotation that are hitting. There's the crit cap formulas there at the bottom.
Yeah, we learned a lot from the beta, and we learned a lot of new data. There's some hidden values that we're working with, so if you are a crit-based class or spec, we now know that when you're attacking a boss level mob, the first 1% crit that you have is ignored. So your crit rating is actually going to be 1% lower than whatever it displays on your screen when you're attacking a boss. Weapon skill, as we've learned, is massively, massively important. Like, we cannot stress this enough, that weapon skill is amazing. One of the things that I was talking about, and we'll talk about more with gear, is the difference between the combat dagger build versus the sealed fate dagger build. In the combat dagger build, you get the weapon skill that increases your daggers. By the time phase 2 rolls around, we have so much accessible gear that has plus dagger skill. What we have learned is that, like he was saying, there's a soft cap for weapon skill once you hit around 8. The rogue talent specifically is going to give you 5. There is a dagger that can give you 6. There's a belt that can give you like 4 or 5. There's some gloves that, if you can get them, give you a lot. The point is that you will hit this weapon skill cap very easily. This is one of the factors that will push combat daggers out of existence, is you will just end up not needing those talent points, and it's a lot of talent points to commit, so that frees up a whole lot of talents to do much higher throughput in other areas. And sorry to hunters that Blizzard hates you and weapon skill is terrible. Whammy, you can attest
That's
to
all
that.
right.
Or
The,
they
the
love
main
them.
the main thing to take away from this page, other than yes, the weapon skill is going to have an effect if you do not have gear that's optimized specifically for hit percentages. Specific items that drop in dungeons, you're going to see some that have like plus bow, crossbow, guns. The other thing to note here is glancing blows specifically have no effect whatsoever on hunters. So our auto shots, our casting shots, all of those are not affected by this at all. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. The swings do. So if you run in and try to weave a swing in or something like that, there's always a chance that that could happen. But in most raid situations, you're not going to be doing that. You're going to be standing max range. You're going to be going through the normal shot rotation that's been pretty much adopted for the last 15.
So, touching on this hit table, you can see why the racial thing is huge. So, with the racial and with edge masters, you're getting your glances are going to do more damage. So when you glance on a target, it can't crit, and it's a reduced damage compared to your normal hit. However, you can get your glancing damage to be the same damage as a normal hit, just it can't crit. So that's why we're big on the orc. And if you have edge masters, that +8 is huge for the soft cap. And as a tank, if you're an orc tank, you're able to get hit cap right off the bat. There's items in the game that'll let you get hit cap. That's going to be huge for threat.
So, we're finally going to start getting into gear. I know we've been talking about it a lot. The moral of the biggest takeaway from this, the single biggest takeaway from this, we can give you gear lists until you're all blue in the face. It's not going at the end of the day, one of the benefits of us playing on a retail supported version of World of Warcraft again is that we are going to have developers, we are going to have support from add-ons, we are going to have all kinds of content. That means that we are going to have sims. When in doubt, sim your character. That is always going to be the best answer, because it is not realistic that you are going to just have best in slot, and a piece of gear might not be good for you without the other pieces of gear in somebody's list to support that build. When in doubt, either raid bots, simcraft, ask Mr. Robot, there will be some system that will support us. I believe raid bots currently, for any of my guys that are playing retail WoW right now, raid bots does currently support low-level players, but it is not perfect, it is not fully optimized, but it does exist. That being said, we came up with a few lists for you guys. We're calling these, I know they say PreBis. Think of this like PreBis. What these lists are doing, and I'm going to bring up an example for you guys right here. What these lists are is these lists are some of the best gear that you can get at a effectively 100% drop rate. These are going to be like the best quest items that you can get. The few items that may come from a dungeon are going to be BOE, and they're going to flood the auction house, and they're going to have very low gold costs. The moral of the story is that this is all going to be very, very accessible gear, and these are things that we really want you guys to look for while you're leveling. We're going to have a whole thing on the next slide about when you're leveling. This website, like I said, I will put all of the relevant links in the YouTube version of this. We'll make sure that Discord has all the appropriate links. You guys will be able to find all of this information. This website is extremely useful. You can come up with all different kinds of gear sets. It has a relatively smart system to try to identify good pieces. The nice thing about it is that if you scroll down as you come down the list, it will actually show you the source of where all of these items come from and what level you need to be able to get it. So this is just going to show you how you can acquire these items. It's a very good resource. It's just a way that we can get more information to you guys. You know, we're going to have stat breakdowns. You're going to be able to figure out all of the different aspects of this. But you're going to have a whole bunch of different lists for how you can gear up. that's going to be a big thing. Before I kick it off, I just want to show everybody the AEP, MAEP values that I was talking about before. This is Shadow Panther. As you guys can see, this website has been backloaded to its classic Rogue version. This is Rogue specific, so I apologize for the people not paying Rogues that are listening to this. One of the big things that I want to push through with this is that when you're looking at the armor sets, what he has updated for us specifically is he has updated the phases that items come into the game. So if you see something that is in blue, that means it is not accessible or projected to not be accessible until phase 2. If it's gray, you're looking at phase 3 before you can you can get these things. So one of the things that you'll notice, and I know we're going to talk about this a lot with the Warriors, if we come down to gloves, aged Corehound leather gloves, molten core drop. This is not in phase 1. Notice that this is an item that has daggers on it. One of the things that we're going to talk about is part of our job is we're here to advocate for loot for you guys. But we work in tandem with the other CLs, and one of the things that we've learned since the beta, since all of these different versions of content, is that a lot of our tanks are going to be using daggers. They're going to be using daggers. It's going to be heavy, heavy threat for them. This is going to be part of their threat set. So this is one of the reasons that we were pushing the different specs involving axes, involving swords. So, by the time Age Corehound gloves do come out, Molten Core will already be on farm, but don't necessarily expect that rogues are getting first pick at these Age Corehound leather gloves anymore. That used to be a thing. That was a thing on private servers. It will probably not be a thing here, because tanks are going to want to have something like this. So this is something that we need to pay attention to when we're simming our gear, when we're trying to find realistic upgrades that we can actually acquire. For those that are curious, yes, Thunder Fury is like the best offhand that a rogue can get until Naxxramas. If you want it, expect to pug it. That's all I can tell you. That's what I'll be doing. That's what you guys can probably do too.
They're just a guidance. Hey, say, hey, you finally hit 60 and we're pushing for a molten core. Hey, what can I get real quick to get gear for tonight? It's not like hey, I need to get this. Hey, I need to get that. Like that's what your pre-raid BIS list is for. Like, hey, this is what I need to work on. When I'm not raiding, I need to work on this. This is just like, hey, I hit 60, I need to get into a raid tonight. Like this is, very, very basic. Rune of the Guard Captain is not on there because it wouldn't let you choose it to the list. It should be available because it's not a raid-related quest.
This website assumes that Rune of the Guard Captain will be a Phase 2 item because it's part of the Dire Maul set. We suspect that it will be available in Phase 1, but plan around it not being there. It's the safer option. If it is there, awesome, get it.
One thing to touch on, I was asked a couple times about bows and stuff. So if you're doing LBRS and you're a melee and you have a hunter in the group, please give the crossbow to the hunter that's in the group, because when Molten Core comes around, the hunters aren't taking the ranged weapons for Molten Core. So just be courteous when you're playing with other hunters. Yeah, oh hey, you're farming your pre-raid. Hey, this is my as a warrior, I'm gonna go, hey, this is pre-raid BIS for me. But am I gonna take it from that hunter that's in my group? No, I'm not. Especially if he's a guildie, because he's gonna be using that all of Molten Core. He's not gonna get an upgrade till they get Locked or whatever it's pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
And they're passing on Dwarvish hand cannon, which is like, I think that's what it's called, the gun with crit. Like that's like big for a warrior. And then what is it? Strider's Mark, which is the one for the bow for rogues, I think. So just keep that in mind when you're doing stuff with hunters. Don't go take that from them. It's just kind of rude.
One other thing to add to that, along with any hunters that are running through BRD, in Phase 1, technically, if Rune Captain is not available, technically, the 20 AP with the extra swing, that trinket is the best that we can get. However, if there are other melee in the group that you're running with, and you pick up that item, don't be surprised if they're pissed. You need to take that very, very last Like if you've got a shaman in there and they've got an off spec, you need to give that to them. It's the very last thing you should be picking up. But if everybody else has it, feel free to grab it. It's just a flat 20 AP increase, and that's probably the best you're going to get if we can't get Rune Captain.
What about if Iron Foe drops?
Hunters can't equip maces.
Boom. Is the big difference of what you guys know of as the tanking meta in terms of threat production will change. Most of your tanks are going to be looking for daggers for threat sets, so I don't necessarily know if Iron Foe is going to be like a sought-after tanking item. Just from what I understand about how we're going to be looking at items, if I was playing a warrior, I probably wouldn't try to take Iron Foe from a DPS as a tanking option, because I know that I'm going to have access to daggers. Thunder
if
Fury
it's
is
guaranteed,
an example of
if it's guaranteed, then great, but that's a good second option.
that. Right. If somebody really wants to play like combat maces, like at the end of the day, this comes also into, if you're in guild groups, this is one of the reasons we're doing these dungeon groups. Like, talk it out with your group. That, like, at the end of the day, we're all here to have fun, like, hang out with us, like, make friends and work with your friends. Like, at the end of the day, you're gonna get the gear. That's just a matter of when. There are certain items that you want to pay very much attention to while you're questing. These are things that, like, you have to acquire, Warriors, if you do not pick your diamond flask from your quest reward, expect that you're going to get a lot of crap from people. This item is amazing.
As a warrior, you are required to take this as a quest reward. It is... If Kurthos finds out that you don't take diamond flasks, he's going to be pissed. Like, I know you're going to look at it and go, hey, there's a Welfare Lionheart on there. Oh, hey, there's some hit shoulders, which, yeah, the hit shoulders are kind of enticing if you look at them. But this diamond flask is a minute-long buff. It is huge. It's huge for speed running. It's a meta-changing item that you're going to have through the whole game. We're running through trash, and you throw that diamond flask on, you pop it, you're going to have a buff that's going to last you for clearing like a whole wing, up to the first boss.
The flip side of that for rogues, things like your Thistle Tea, I can't believe I'm even having this conversation. I had to speak to somebody the other day that told me that they, back in the day, they avoided all of Eastern Kingdoms just because they didn't want to ever have to go to Eastern Kingdoms as a horde. There are certain quests, like, he didn't have poisons. He didn't have poisons because he never went to Eastern Kingdoms to do it. Pick up your Thistle Tea. Do your quests. This is not stuff that we need to tell you guys.
So, Marker Forging is your DPS is like one of your best necks you can get right off the bat, and it's available phase 1 right out of the get-go. And if you have that neck, you're gonna have that neck until you replace it with either like Ani neck or the neck for rogues, the neck that drops off Neff. It's like 30 agility and hit. Like that's like your best neck for the whole freaking game until freaking TBC comes out.
TOC.
So like, yeah, like you're gonna have that Market of Forging for a while. It's a In Dreams quest line. It's called. It's in the Eastern Western Plaguelands. No, Eastern Plaguelands. Starts in Tyrion.
I have it up on the stream right now. Like, you guys see how highly ranked this blue necklace is, and you see how few items you're going to be replacing this necklace with. Like, this necklace is busted. The takeaway, pick up these quest items. Make sure that you keep an eye out for these items.
So, Seal the Dawn. This is a secretly OP trinket for X. You'll be using that next. So, don't pass up these items. Make sure you do them. Thrashblade, it's a great sword to pick. Even though it's like level 40 something like that, you get the quest.
It's really low level, but it's so good.
Yeah, if you use Thrashblade with Iron Foe, like it's insane. Yeah, it's like so broken. God help the tank if you get everything the proc off the bat.
Part of these suggestions to you guys is it's not just about like what is the best, it's about what is feasibly obtainable for you guys to actually get. What is the most time effective thing? There's a ridiculous quest chess piece that rogues can get that is way better than Trap Hook Jerkin, but the amount of work you have to put in to try to acquire that chess piece for it to just be replaced, it's not worth your time. So that's why, you see so many variants when you're looking at these lists. That's why if you're looking at Shadow Panther or whatever situation, whatever group, whatever list you're looking at, look at where the source comes from. See how feasible it actually is. See if you can find what the drop rate is. One of the daggers that we were talking about was Fell Striker. Of course, Fell Striker is amazing. It has like a 1% drop. Not every single player is going to have it. So don't count on things like that.
One thing that, compared to other private servers, if you guys are coming from private servers, Gladiator's chess piece is going to have the 1.12 stats on it right off the get-go, be available right out of the way. Like, that's like massive for hunters and warriors. It's like 2% crit, and it's an awesome chess piece to get. BRD Arena level like 54 or something. You can put that thing on. So AQ40 is huge for us. That's like, it's like a big mark on the timeline for servers. When AQ comes out, make sure you have Cold Rage daggers from running RFD. There's Darrow Spike, Glacial Blade. Those are available, I think, from quests. And I think the PPMs, I think Hammer of the North Wind was one of the best weapons to have for procs. With Icy Enchants, you got to have Icy Enchants on these weapons. Like, it's going to be like the one thing that makes us choose you to come to that raid for that spot is having these weapons, having them enchanted, having engineering for the zapper charges. Like, those are all going to determine whether you are in that raid killing that boss with us.
Building off of that, if at any point in time, when you guys acquire your weapons, a big thing to note is don't get rid of your old weapons when you get a new weapon. Like, anytime you replace a weapon, you keep that secondary weapon, and you're going to want to back up enchant that older weapon with Demon Slaying, because that's just going to help us kill world bosses faster. That's going to get us through Kazakh better. So just be mindful. Just because you've replaced a weapon, you don't necessarily get rid of that weapon. If you have something that deals frost damage, you keep that. That's how we're getting through AQ. It's stuff like that. So just be mindful with the gear you have.
If you're a melee DPS, there's not a whole lot of loot, especially if you're a warrior. There's not a tier designed for a warrior DPS. One thing to take away from this slide is grinding rank 10. If you have the rank 10 armor, you're going to use that till pretty much AQ. If you're in this raid and you're primarily a PvPer, and say the one example we have is like DFT. Don't expect to get a DFT if you're only a PvPer. It's we're not going to give the best in slot PvE stuff to somebody that isn't like a PvEer. If you're in a raid, maybe as a filler, or if you're just there to get a PvP weapon, like don't expect to get that type of stuff. If you're a rogue and hey, you're a dagger rogue. Like, that's what you're going to be. Your spec, that's going to be the, what you're getting. Don't expect to get Maldath or CTS or any of that stuff. It's, we have these things assigned that way for a reason.
Yeah, that being said, if this slide is mostly for the people who want to PvE as their primary thing and PvP as a secondary thing. If you're the reverse of this, if your top priority is PvP and you also want to splash in with some raid gear every now and then, there's a whole separate thing. I know the PvPers already had their meeting. They should have an archive of that, but this is just kind of an ode to them. Be mindful that most of this is just visual effect that we're trying to add to illustrate some comparisons. Obviously, if you end up wanting to rank all the way to 14, if you want to rank even higher than that, the gear just progressively gets better and better and better, but 10 is just the minimum that we're basically asking you guys for, which is still a relevant comparison.
It's not going to be easy. It'll take time. I mean, you might have to take a focus for a few weeks and just PvP, which, we're okay with people taking breaks from raiding for PvPing and even real life stuff. We all have real life, so we get that. But rank 10 is like where it's at, and if you can hit rank 14, those weapons will last you a very long time, and it's like a life commitment to go from 10 to 14. It's huge.
Hunters that are coming in with rank 14, if you're fully geared in the PvP gear, you won't replace that until max.
Do we have any melee druids here? Probably not.
No.
No.
That being said, like just as an homage to them, it's not necessarily a no. It's the amount of work that you would have to invest into the character to
Yeah.
be able to make the character relevant. It's doable if you are super committed to it. It's something we can talk about at a later date, but for the sake of, that's probably not something that most people are going to want to do.
Right. I was just gonna say that, the rank 13 is kind of a requirement if you're gonna play
Right.
druid seriously as a DPS.
Like rank 14 is a requirement. Like
Yeah.
if you're coming here expecting to be our KD DPS and you have no ambition to PvP, like I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, the flip side to that is and don't take it the wrong way, but if you're set on playing one of the what is generally considered a meme-ish build, you want to be a spell power rogue, you want to be a feral druid, you want to be an enhancement shaman, you can still come and talk to us. Like, we're still here as melee leaders. Like, we're happy to help people in whatever capacity they want to be. If it's something you are seriously wanting to do, like, we can show you the ways to get there, but know that you're really going to have to work for it.
And with that being said, as a enhancement shaman, do we really want to use that debuff spot for your storm strike? Like there's going to be a time for it. Hey, molten core, yeah, sure, why not? Somebody's got an alt enhancement shaman, and they're not just AFK drooling on the keyboard. They're actually doing something. Yeah, I'm sure we could do that, but it's Nax, AQ40 stuff like that. Like debuff slots are going to be huge. We can't be messing around with that. And as Alan Central, whatever his name is, he actually put out a video that discusses meme specs and how I have this feeling about them. They're selfish specs. They're people that play them are selfish. When you could be playing a class or a role that is so much better than that meme spec, you're affecting 39 other people at that point. And I am not a fan of it. And that's just my 2 cents. But we can have alts and stuff like that doing that stuff, but don't expect to bring your enhancement shaman into Nax.
So don't go to him. No, it's there's some fair points in that. But yeah, at the end of the day, like, if you want to play something and you're passionate about it, just come talk to us. So that being said, the raid expectations. So there's a nice little roster sheet here. It's going to give a shit ton of information. Like I said, all of these links are going to be accessible to you guys. We'll walk you through them at a later time, but we wanted to get through this as painlessly as possible. And on that note, that's the whole point of our raids, is we want everything to be as painlessly as possible. Like, we know what this content's going to look like. And even if you don't, even if you are, not from the private server community, or if you, haven't looked into this content since vanilla, or if you're somebody that started Burning Crusade on later, like, a lot of this content, it might be new to you. So if there's a point in time where people are giving you crap about, maybe you don't know what the content looks like, trust me, first of all, there are ways, there are guides, there are things that we can do as the class leaders to help steer you so that you are as prepared for the raid as possible. But to that same extent, like, this is a really good point to say, like, we are not going to tolerate any kind of bullying, like, period. Like, there's one thing if you're just, like, fucking around with somebody and, like, you're having a good time with it, but if there's someone new who wants to learn and, like, really wants to get this classic experience, and you're getting shit on by somebody because, maybe you don't know the fight as well as them, or maybe you haven't been playing on private servers for the last 15 years, like, come talk to us. We'll make sure that shit gets taken care of real quick, because that makes us look bad, that's going to make you feel bad, and at the end of the day, like, we're here to play together, to be a group of people that can be friends and support each other and have a lot of fun, playing this game. So, at the end of the day, like, come to the raid as prepared as you are able to. If you have questions, this is literally what we're here for. We're here to help guide you. That being said, we're going to guide you. We're not going to hold your hand. We're not going to, chew up all the content and put it in your mouth for you. But don't be afraid to ask. That's the biggest thing I can take away from this.
Another thing, if you're before you approach us with a situation like that, just to go back to the bullying point, please take a screenshot of your chats if there's something going on that you can actually screen grab, and send that to us as well. Not for the point that we're going to be going after these people for the words that they're using or whatever. I mean, we will have a conversation with them, but the more information that we have from the conversation that you had with this individual, the better informed we can be as far as not only de-escalating the issue, but also making a better informed decision. So help us help you.
Should some sort of issue arise, please utilize the chain of command. Come talk to the class leaders. If it's super important, obviously, you can go and tell, anyone in the guild would be happy to help that's an officer or higher. But if it's something minor, try to utilize the chain of command. Talk to your class leaders first. Our GM is very busy. He's also military, so he has designed our ranks to be similar to that of military.
We are looking at the benefit of having full feral druid. However, if I don't know if there's anybody here this pertains to, if you plan on being a feral druid, well, you should have been there for the tank meeting, because you are pretty much going to be an off tank, and then if we don't need a tank for the fight, you're going to be a DPS. You are going to have a very high level of expectations, especially rank 14. There's a lot of things that are going to be expected to you for us to take you seriously as a kitty DPS, or you're going to be an off tank too. So not just kitty DP. You're going to have the battle res is huge too for the raid.
This is basically just another resource guide. Like I said, we're going to have all of this. We're going to have tons and tons of resources for you guys to get to. So if at some point in time you get lost, feel free to ask. We're going to make sure that you guys have access to things. As far as add-ons are concerned, everything is still in moving parts. So who the hell knows what's going to happen? We know we're going to have add-ons. We know we're going to have disgusting add-ons. We already know that Weak Auras has been ported over for Classic WoW, and Weak Auras is the most powerful add-on that we've seen since the banning of CT. It's going to be insane. So just be on the lookout. Once the servers actually go live, we're going to see what add-ons look like. We do know that we are using the modern WoW architecture for coding and for add-ons and for macros. So new code, new Lua. If you have any questions, I'm very well versed in this. I'm sure there are many other officers that are also well versed in this. We can make sure that things port over nicely, especially if you've been playing on private servers for a long time now. This might be very new to you. That being said, because we're using the new architecture, there are certain add-ons that have existed throughout WoW's history. I've been getting a lot of questions about whether or not certain add-ons that were problematic post-classic are going to be available. These are things like AVR, which existed during the Wrath era and allowed you to physically draw within the 3D space of the game. Because we are working on the new architecture of the game, any add-on that has been problematic and banned or protected code by Blizzard within the last 15 years will not work in Classic. All the background stuff will be the same. So you can put your mind at ease. You're not going to have to worry about downloading AVR. You're not going to have stuff like that. That being said, we will have things like Weak Auras. We will have updated swing timers, boss mods. We'll have all stuff like that. So just keep your head to the ground, keep your feet to the ground. Just be mindful.
And touching on add-ons and Weak Auras and macros real quick. That the macro thing is actually huge for warriors. Stance dancing, using abilities, back to auto stance. I know myself, I do one for Zerka Rage and switching stances, so whirlwind, going to overpower, just not having to have that stupid dedicated auto attack start on your action bar is going to be nice compared to vanilla servers. And as far as weak auras, like that, this is weak auras is huge. Power auras is what we had before that. The shaman leader Storm, I've been talking to him about doing something for warriors. To track your like overpower buffs, debuffs. I want to get something rolling for that. When you use your blood fury, you know how long it lasts for. Your death wish, when you pop these cooldowns, to show you how much longer you have on it. Maybe you can squeeze in, an extra attack or something while under the effect to get the benefits. Debuffs on the boss, Sunder Armors, Demo Shout, Thunderclap. These are all new, and we can track things a lot better. It'll make our raids easier for personal cooldowns, trinkets, any of that stuff. I'm really excited about this add-on actually, because I've never used it.
Yeah, I've been using it for quite a while. I'm fairly versed in coding for it. If there will be any required add-on, expect that weak auras will be on that list. It will replace. You can quite literally replace your entire UI. You can have mouse overs. You can have tooltips. You will, depending on what ends up happening, we may even replace our boss mods using weak auras instead, because they are just that efficient. It's extremely low usage with add-on space, so if for some reason in 2019 you happen to be playing, a 15-year-old game on a toaster, this is your one add-on that you'll be able to run, and it won't overtax your machine, and you'll be fine with it. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly useful. There's all kinds of information. You can see a lot of hidden things. Anyone that was watching me on the beta, any of those stats that you saw on the side of my screen, which are normally hidden stats, those are all weak auras that I hand-coded. Those are all things that are very easy to display. There's going to be some crazy stuff. This add-on is going to make a very interesting shift in what we know for Classic WoW. I'm a little nervous about it, actually, because I think it might be too powerful for the environment that we're going to be playing in. Yeah, I really want to knock something home to a lot of these meetings that we've had. We've dialed in a lot on the private server community. I know the vast majority of us are currently, former private server aficionados, but I want to point something out to all of the retail guys that are either coming in for nostalgia or have never seen this content because they started the game before that. I really want to just bring home that there are a couple of just big fundamental differences between what modern WoW has become and what some of the content was in classic WoW. A big functional fundamental difference is that modern day WoW is very mechanic heavy, and a lot of it is very reactive gameplay style. You'll have these massive effects that will have huge gameplay changing things that will then be answered by you as the player. Whether it's, you're popping a healing cooldown or you're putting a positioning, you're doing something. A lot of current WoW is very reactive, comparatively speaking to what you're going to experience playing Classic WoW. Classic WoW's content, a lot of these fights are a lot simpler in terms of mechanical prowess to a lot of what the retail guys are going to be used to, but so much more of it is proactive based. It's very, very different in the sense that we're going to be, positioning prior to something going off is going to be so much more relevant versus where, in modern WoW, you're going to have a lot more things that, something will happen and then you'll adjust to it. This is, you need to be ready for when it happens, because the adjustment is you just die. A lot of the examples of this are not well-received fights that current WoW kind of gets criticized for. A lot of the mechanical fights that have crazy, you screw up, you die. Two expansions ago, it was Zul'Harrak, you screwed up, you died. That's more the mentality that you're going to see looking at Classic, comparatively speaking. So if any of you guys are from the private server community, you guys might think this is fine. You guys might think this is going to be very easy for you. It is going to be a transition for the people that are coming from retail that have either never seen this or are no longer used to seeing stuff like this. So that's just a mentality shift that some of the retail guys are going to have to transition when they go into this way of playing the game.